Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. Time to get ready to experience the aerial skills of one of the world's greatest military parachute display teams. Get your cameras ready, because it's time to introduce the Royal Air Force Falcons.
The team coach, Flight Sergeant Liam Lyons, will be looking out the door, waiting for the right time to signal to the team to leave the aircraft. He will exit first, then each jumper will follow, exiting every 3 seconds into free fall. Turn and face the skies. Get your cameras ready.
They've not actually done anything. Open the door. Oh, at least they've got a van though, just in case.
And there they go, the 2025 Royal Air Force Parachute Display Team, the Falcons. The red smoke trailing from their legs is created by smoke canisters attached to their boots, which were activated at the very last moment before jumping from the aircraft. We can see all 7 canopies have safely deployed as the team immediately begin maneuvering into the snake formation. For 2025, the team have been working on a very dynamic and routine over the winter months, and we hope you enjoy the visual spectacle as much as the Royal Air Force Falcons enjoy flying it. They thought the snake formation by turning 180 degrees back up to jump one direction. They've now split, now turn 90 degrees towards each other to create the crisscross. With blazing speeds of over 45 miles an hour, the team now immediately begin maneuvering into the very dynamic and signature maneuver, the carousel. This is the team's favourite maneuver and requires vast amount of concentration. The team coach is called to an end for the carousel, as they immediately begin maneuvering into the Sabre Chase and our final formation for today. You'll see them essentially forming a snake formation, but this time with dynamic left and right turns to position themselves into the landing arena today. You may also see one parachutist at the back there, that is Sergeant Luke Riddle. He is currently flying the Union Jack. As the parachutists approach the DZ, they'll be able to hear you, so please put your hands together and give them a huge cheer to encourage them and to show your appreciation for the skills demonstrated today by the Royal Air Force Falcons! Approaching the ground now is Flight Sergeant Liam Lyons, Sergeant Andy Lynch, Sergeant Mike Atkinson, Sergeant Marcus Shields, Sergeant Aaron Holmes, and Sergeant Greg Ashleby. As you can see, it is quite windy on the DZ. We haven't quite finished just yet, as the team will be completing their line-up and official salute today. They'll quickly remove their equipment as their helmets and goggles come off and their parachutes are gathered in. They need to secure their parachutes to make sure they don't blow away or get all tangled up. You'll see they'll place their heavy harnesses on top of the parachutes itself. Each Falcon wears a bracket on each leg which holds a pair of smoke canisters, which right now are very hot. So you will see the team wearing gloves. This is not only because they must handle the hot canisters, but also because the temperatures can be freezing at high altitudes. You can now see the DZ Safety Officer and OC Falcons, Flight Lieutenant Alice Adam Kearns, take their position in front of Wing Commander Penny Brady from the Royal Air Force Station Cosford, who will be taking the salute today. Once all Falcons have their RAF berets on, that is assigned to the DZSO that all drills have been complete. She will then call the team to the lineup, and OC Falcons will call them to the attention position.
Memorial flight.
It's not you process it on an iPhone. Well, I'm sure. enemy squad.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I give you the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, lest we forget. What a fabulous sound as the 2,300 horsepower Pratt & Whitney double Wasp radial engine is really wound up in a dive, and showing us here
something of one of the attributes that made this such an outstanding aeroplane, namely the fact that because it's so big and so heavy, it was an aeroplane that you could build up a lot of energy in a dive. Fly through, particularly on air-to-ground tasking, and then climb rapidly away. This was, however, also an excellent air-to-air dogfighter, perhaps not as good as the likes of the Spitfire or the Mustang as a close-in dogfighter, because it is a large and quite bulky aeroplane. But everyone I've ever spoken to who's flown a P47 praises this aircraft's handling characteristics to the hilt, and as a gun platform for example, air-to-ground strafing missions, very steady, very stable. And it was those sort of attributes that meant it had such a great role after the P51 Mustang came to the fore in the US 8th Air Force. Main fighter types deployed to Europe with the US Army Air Forces in the Second World War. There was this, there was the P51 Mustang, we'll see in a bit, and the very distinctive twin-engine, twin-boom Lockheed P38 Lightning. And of all those three, it was the P47 that played the biggest role in the lead-up to D-Day, softening up the German Luftwaffe at its bases on the ground. And you can see this one has got the black and white invasion stripes applied to the wings and fuselage, which were painted on as an identifier in the hours leading up to D. This aircraft was capable of taking a tremendous amount of damage and still make it back home. Some amazing pictures from the Second World War of aircraft that did make it home, where there's more holes than airframe. And of course, one of the things that helped that was the double Wasp engine, which is air-cooled. We've seen the Spitfire and the Hurricane, Griffin engine, Merlin engine, all liquid-cooled. They had a lot of pipe work. One round damaging that pipework means the coolant leaks, that terrible white thin stream of smoke behind, and the engine will cease. Not so in an aircraft like this. And it's interesting you should mention that, Andy, because some years ago I met a veteran of the 78th Fighter Group, the Duxford-based Huey Lamb, and he said they were not keen to switch from the P47 to the P51 for that very reason. They thought the P51 would be badly affected by battle damage. Of course, they soon grew to love the Mustang, as he said, but it was in their minds when that conversion happened. Was that dreaded little plume of white smoke behind the aircraft, which was the coolant leaking away, and that could come about by one single round. A rifle bullet from the ground fired into the air happens to hit some of the pipework, just like your radiator on the car. But of course with your car you can stop and let it cool down. In this you had about 90 seconds before the engine would freeze solid. And in the sort of low-level roles that these aircraft were playing, especially in the European theatre, but also in the Pacific, that sort of survivability really mattered. We mustn't forget, Andy, that the RAF flew Thunderbolts as well, 830 of them with South USA, but since 2018 it's been back here with the fleet of fighter aviation engineering.
Top shots as well. Yeah, sorry. Oh, it's on a whole film now. It's not digital. Yeah, I do that as well. Yeah, but it is.
Such a charismatic aeroplane, beautifully flown, and a very, very important aeroplane for us to have as part of the lineup of airworthy warbirds on hand with different UK operators. Such was the role this aircraft had flying out of the UK during the Second World War with US Army Air Forces units and overseas with the Royal Air Force. May look like a big brute, but believe me, those who fly it say it's a here in Britain. Gabriel Barton there, flying the Republic P47D Thunderbolt. And we'll see the P51 from the same operator, Fighter Aviation Engineering, a little later in the programme. So, just looking ahead to what we have planned for the next hour or so. The next display is due to be one of the additions to the flying programme. In fact, I can see it just taxiing out onto the runway now, way to your left-hand side. In fact, that's the Tutor, I think, that's going to take off first. And then he's going to disappear into the hold and come back to display for us after the next item, which will be the bird dog. As I mentioned, a short but very sweet and loud exhibition from the F-35B Lightning II. There goes the Tutor, which we'll be seeing back with us shortly. Of course, very familiar to many of you in the local area as the mount of the Cosford base universities of there it goes. And indeed, a US Army need for a new aircraft for the observation, fire control and liaison roles. Importantly, it was to be of all-metal construction, replace the likes of the earlier Piper L4 and Stinson L5, designs that had dated from World War II. First flew in 1949, entered service with the US Army the following year. And the US Army's bird dogs, called L-19s at that point, went straight into action in the Korean War. They were also flown by observation squadrons of the US Marine Corps in Korea. And only one bird dog was actually flown by the RAF, by a single RAF flight operating in Korea, and it was superior to the Oster AOP-6s that were otherwise being flown by the Brits in Korea. But nonetheless, the Oster soldiered on, and we only ever flew that one bird dog. You can see here, it's a very manoeuvrable platform at low level. And as we watch this display of the manoeuvres, I think we should really just remember the role of this aircraft, because what it's doing now is what it did in its war role, but it did this right over the heads of the enemy. Its main job was to spot the positions of the enemy and then pass that information back to various platforms. That could be 4 F-4s about to tip in and drop a lot of bombs. It could be to a ship out at sea to fire a salvo of 16-inch caliber shells. It could be artillery pieces, but its job was to get very low, very close to the enemy, and then pass that information back. That is a very serious military role. Yeah, the Forward Air Controller Airborne, as we now call it, FAC-A. So capabilities that we're seeing, very manoeuvrable, good slow speed handling is exactly what it needs for that role, but not so good in terms of surviving the battlefield. Nonetheless though, Andy, I mean, you were talking about how the P47 could withstand a lot of battle damage. That was true of this, what might appear to be light aeroplane. In 1952, flying in Korea, one US Army bird dog had 12 feet of its starboard wing shot off by anti-aircraft artillery, but it was repaired and it flew again the next day. And the courage of the crew of this aircraft, because by definition they've got to have good view. The side windows are actually canted out so you can stick your head out and look down. There's transparency on top of the wing so you can look up. They must have felt very, very vulnerable. They certainly must have. And when these aircraft went on to fly in the Vietnam War, by which time the US Army had turned most of its bird dogs over to the US Air Force, and they were now known as the O-1, O for observation. 469 bird dogs were lost by all the operators that flew them there. Some did remain in US Army service, but mostly they were turned over to the Air Force. They were also flown there by the US Marine Corps, by the South Vietnamese, by Air America on behalf of the CIA. Now, I mentioned the colour scheme on this one is that of South Vietnam, and it represents one of the most fascinating bits of the whole bird dog story. It's painted as the aircraft of Major Quang Le of the South Vietnamese Air Force, who on the morning of the 30th of April 1975 took off from Con Son Island to escape the end of fighting in South Vietnam as the North Vietnamese overran Southern Territory, and of course Saigon was evacuated. He flew his little bird dog out over the South China Sea, hoping to find a US Navy carrier to land on, and he ended up doing so. He landed on USS Midway, and it was the first bird dog ever to touch down on an aircraft carrier. Now I admit we have a fairly brisk wind today, but that is a very slow speed pass. It is indeed, and hopefully we'll have given you the chance to look at some of the equipment this bird dog is carrying. Under the wings, you might have noticed it's got 8 2.5-inch incendiary rockets, which were known as Willie Peaks. Of course, these are dummies for display purposes. Those were used for part of the role that Andy was describing earlier, marking enemy positions. And on top of the wing, you can see there's a huge 8-foot tall whip antenna, and that was used so that the aircraft could maintain communications with ground stations when it was getting very low down over the battlefield. For example, low literally into the jungle canopy or amongst the weeds. I mean, by bird dog standards, this is quite a high altitude display. It really would be right down there, very low. And target marking, it just makes me think of the Pathfinders during the Second World War, so very similar. Dropping flares, dropping something that illuminates a point. Even if that's not the exact target, it can be used as a marker that then can be relayed. See my flares, left, 400 yards.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons aircraft like this definitely have to be categorised as warbirds, just like the Spitfires, just like the Hurricanes, just like the Mustangs and so forth.
And if you're the enemy and you have one of these above you, it's a prime target because you know what that aircraft is doing. If it sees you, it will call up some support, be it from the air, be it from the ground, be it from sea. So, yeah, these were prime targets aircraft for the enemy.
Yeah, you can see the sort of aircraft that
To some extent pioneered that role during the Second World War, represented here in our static display just off to the right of the control tower as part of one of our vintage static display areas by Simon Tilling's lovely little Oster Mark I, one of the very first air observation post aircraft operated by the RAF on behalf of the British Army during the Second World War. And of course it's a role that endured, because after the Bird Dog we moved into sort of the Skymaster and the Bronco. We did more recent, and then helicopters as well. More recent aircraft, but still doing the same role, which was really the first ever role of air power, all the way back to the First World War.
Yes.
Seeing over the enemy's trenches, over their line. What are they doing? Are my shells hitting the enemy, or are they not?
Yeah, it was the, as you say, it was one of the bedrocks of air power from the beginning, but this use of high-winged light aeroplanes really dates from the run-up to World War II and the British artillery officer called Jack Parham, who had a little Aeronca C2 of his own, and he realised the potential of flying an aircraft like that for the artillery spotting role, and it led on to the likes of the Oster that I just mentioned, for the US Army, particularly the Piper L4 Cub, and as time went on, this aircraft took over that role. And it's great to see it represented here by this one, which dates from 1957. It served with the French Army aviation arm, the Aviation Légère de l'Armée de Terre. It was sold onto the civil market in the 1990s. It's been through a few owners in the UK. It's currently part of the fleet of Kennett Aviation, established by that great enthusiast of vintage aviation, particularly post-war types, of which he's had a good few pass through his hands. Tim Manor, based at Old Warden, the home of the Shuttleworth collection in Bedfordshire, and in fact at the controls today for that very nice display of the L19E Bird Dog was one of the Shuttleworth collection pilots, former RAF TriStar pilot Scott Butler.
Fabulous.
Yeah, with a parachute.
So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're about to go back to the Royal Air Force for the next display, and to tell you all about it, here is Flying Officer Seb Wilson.
Hello, good afternoon everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the 2025 Royal Air Force Tutor Display. My name is Flying Officer Seb Wilson and I'm the Tutor Display Manager this season. It's a pleasure to display the Grob Tutor for you all today. And now, flying in towards us from the centre at nearly 200 miles an hour is the Tutor Display Pilot, Flight Lieutenant Bob Hughes. As he pulls up at 5G, he converts his speed into height to perform his first manoeuvre, the hammerhead. Flight Lieutenant Hughes was born in Carmarthen, South Wales, and started his flying career in the Royal Air Force in 1989, flying the Queen of the Skies, the VC-10, out of RAF Rise Norton. Then, as a search and rescue pilot on the Sea King. From the end of this half horizontal, Bob will push negative 2G to level the aircraft upside down for an inverted pass. This is Bob's second year with Tutor Display. He's operating a base height of 300 feet, except for the two final passes at just 100 feet. The Tutor obviously is the first port of call for most people's experience with aviation in the Royal Air Force, be that Royal Air Force Air Cadets or University Air Squadron students. The next manoeuvre is a ballistic roll, which Bob can use to gain energy for the next part of the sequence. When not displaying, Bob is a qualified flying instructor, or QFI, on 115 Squadron, based at RAF Wittering. He trains fellow frontline pilots into QFIs. During his varied career, Bob has amassed over 8,000 flying hours on 15 different aircraft types. This represents almost a full year in the air. After this half Cuban, Bob will enter the 4-point roll. Get your cameras ready, it's a great photo opportunity. The Tutor has a top speed of 212 miles an hour, or 185 knots, and can achieve maximum positive 6G. Next, we have another wing over, a combined pitching and rolling manoeuvre used to turn the flight path through 180 degrees. You'll notice that every wing over is slightly different, as Bob carefully selects his flight path to cater for differing wind conditions and aircraft energy states. Displaying the Tutor requires careful energy management to its low power-to-weight ratio. Bob now rolls 90 degrees while pointing straight up before completing a stall turn at almost zero airspeed. The two 90-degree turns allow Bob to continue in the same direction. The Tutor is operated by No. 6 Flying Training School in partnership with Babcock International, primarily flying University Air Squadron students and RAF Air Cadets. There are 13 air experience flights across the UK that offer flights to up to 20,000 cadets each year. This could be you if you're between 13 and 20 years old. 50 air cadets a year are now being taught to fly the Tutor up to solo standard. After this conventional stall turn, Bob will enter the slow roll. During the slow roll, you may have noticed the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund heart on the belly of this aircraft, seen since 2022 to celebrate this fantastic charity. The Benevolent Fund supports Royal Air Force personnel, air cadets and veterans wherever they're in need. We are proud to raise awareness for a charity that gives so much to the whole of the RAF family. Visit our tent or view our Tutor Display leaflets and website to access a QR code to donate to the Benevolent Fund. For those of you that are considering to go into university, there are 15 university air squadrons across the UK. On the squadrons, students are taught to fly the Tutor by highly experienced military flying instructors, like Bob. It's worth mentioning that the UAS flying syllabus does include solo aerobatics. UASs also provide a huge opportunity for personal development, as well as a wide variety of adventurous training in the UK and expeditions across the globe. I used to be a University Air Squadron student, and it's the best decision I made at uni. We're now in the high energy section display with a derry turn, quarter clover, and now just finishing the loop, which are quintessential aerobatic manoeuvres. Today, the Royal Air Force is recruiting for multiple rewarding and demanding professions and has an exciting future with the continued development of our combat, utility and maritime patrol aircraft, as well as UK Space Command. They will soon be joined by the introduction of our airborne early warning aircraft, E7 Wedgetail, and newly remotely piloted capabilities with Protector. The high tempo of operations continues today with aircraft and personnel deployed around the world, operating with NATO and our other allies. Visit the RAF website to find out more about our professions, including, but not limited to, aircrew, air operations controllers, engineers, medics, cyberspace specialists, and many more. Bob will now enter the final section of display with an oblique loop and a half tubing. The oblique loop puts the aircraft in plan form twice to the crowd, so it's an excellent photo opportunity. I'd like to take this moment to say a big thank you to our supporters this season. They are the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund, Babcock International and Runway 25, who've provided much of the merchandise we're giving out at our stand this season. If you've taken any good photos of the Tutor, make sure to tag our social medias and use the hashtag TutorDisplay. Bob will now bring the Tutor around for his departing wave at 100 feet. It's our final great photo opportunity. A big thank you to Cosford Air Show for hosting us today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the 2025 Royal Air Force Tutor Display.
Well, Seb, thank you very much for that great display. Very important aircraft around these here parts, of course, with the only aircraft, RAF aircraft that's actually based here at Cosford. So, yeah, pass our thanks on to everybody involved.
I will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So while we just have a couple of moments before the next display item, a reminder to not only look up while you're here today, but look down and look around. So many things to have a look around at, to interact with, people to talk to, opportunities to part with your cash, opportunities to eat and drink. It is a proper at-home day, so please make sure you do have a good walk around. There's so many things on the airfield here, including in most of the... Next to it is something that looks a bit like a Eurofighter Typhoon, but isn't. It is the remarkable British Aerospace EAP Experimental Aircraft Programme, one of the forerunners of the Typhoon programme, and this aircraft, part of the RAF Museum collection, has been brought outside and the two are parked together. I can't remember seeing this before. Ben, I think you're exactly right. It's a real recent piece of aviation history, and to see the two together, you can see. And there's the Mustang then on the roll to get into the air and hold off while the Typhoon displays. on the Eurofighter Typhoon F-16. So after that 3-point hesitation roll, look to your left as Nathan repositions for his next manoeuvre. Now this is something very special indeed. It is 5 aileron rules. Eurojet EJ200 afterburning turbofans, 13,500 pounds of thrust without afterburner, 20,000 pounds with afterburner engaged, and it powers this aircraft to a top speed of Mach 2. Outside turn, pushing the aircraft away from you, the blood being forced into Nathan's head, but converting back into positive G, with another what's known as derry turn straight in front of us, rolling one way, turning the other. And 2 more aileron rolls on the outbound 45-degree line. And now we see something of that performance I was talking about as Nathan accelerates the Typhoon in for his high-speed pass, pretty much as quick as he can go in the air display environment, just under 700 miles an hour. Pulling about 9G, positive G, as he breaks away from you there, but he'll now be throttling back the 2 EJ200 engines to idle, bringing that speed down to somewhere in the region of 120 knots, and here, Andy, is where the digital fly-by-wire controls of the Typhoon really come into play. They do indeed. There's nearly 100 control movements per second this aircraft is performing just to hold this very steady, stable attitude. The design, like many modern designs, is actually inherently unstable, and the fly-by-wire control system affords artificial stability, and it also provides what's known as carefree handling, meaning the pilot can't take the aircraft outside of its elements. You've got roll control from the small, what are known as flaperons, combination of flap and aileron on the wings, the flaperons, and those 2 canard foreplanes before Nathan brings the aircraft back onto the main display axis. Once again, all the way around this maximum rate turn. Producing the famous power plant under license.
But also legacy versions of the
If ever there were an aircraft that's an example of Anglo-American cooperation in military aviation, this aeroplane, the North American Mustang, is it. Because it was produced to meet a British requirement. Famously, a British purchasing commission in New York City was on the search for potential new American-built fighter designs for the Royal Air Force during 1940. One of the companies they visited was North American Aviation in Dallas, Texas. We had the idea that potentially North American, which was still quite a new company at that point, albeit already building the Harvard trainer, one of which we'll see later, in quantity for the RAF, could build the Curtiss P40 Warhawk for the RAF under license. However, North American had other ideas, and it came up with a design it called the NA-73. Its progress, that design, from initial conception to first flight before the end of 1940 wasn't quite as rapid in terms of the number of days involved as has sometimes been stated, but it was nonetheless astonishingly quick, and it produced a highly advanced fighter in aerodynamic terms. The aircraft duly went through flight testing and was earmarked for operational service, and indeed entered service with both the US Army Air Forces and the RAF, known to the Americans as the P51, in fairly short order, also known as the A-36 as a ground attack and dive bomber platform to the Americans, in which role it was very successful. And all of that was with the Allison V1710 engine, which also equipped most Curtiss P40s. Very good engine for operations in the low-level role, but it rather ran out of puff at altitude, so this aircraft wasn't initially able to fulfill the potential that was certainly evident in the design as a high-altitude, long-range escort fighter. But that was where Britain again really entered the story, because the then commanding officer of a unit based at Duxford called the Air Fighting Development Unit, which evaluated new aircraft and new capabilities for the RAF during wartime, Ian Campbell-Ord, was talking to a friend of his, a man called Ronnie Harker, who was a service liaison test pilot for Rolls-Royce. And between them, the idea was hatched that wouldn't it be a good proposal to engine this, as I say, very streamlined fighter and thereby transform its performance with a Rolls-Royce Merlin. A Mustang was duly converted with a Rolls-Royce built Merlin. It was test flown at the Rolls-Royce factory airfield at Hucknall. Immediately, the transformation was clear. Rolls-Royce couldn't fulfil the sort of demand that was required, though, to produce the Merlins for Mustang production on top of Spitfires, Mosquitoes, Lancasters and the like. So that was where Packard entered the story in the United States, licensed producing the Merlin, and this was where the legend of the Merlin Mustang was born. The Allison-engine Mustangs, however, continued until very late in the war. Particularly the RAF flew them for low-level reconnaissance roles during the D-Day period. But it was the Merlin-powered versions, like the P51D that we see represented here, that were the great long-range escort fighters for the US 8th Air Force in the European theatre, and indeed for the US Army Air Forces out in the Pacific as well. That was the final pass for this Mustang, which will be coming into land as well. And the markings, I mentioned the fact that this aircraft is named Jersey Jerk. That was the personal moniker applied to a P51D that was flown by one of the most notable 8th Air Force names of the Second World War, Donald Strait. He was assigned to the 361st Fighter Squadron stationed at Martlesham Heath in Suffolk, initially equipped with the P47 like we saw earlier. Strait wanted to name the first P47 that was allocated to him as Jersey Bounce, but his crew chief had other ideas, his crew chief being named Doc Watson, who was described later by Strait as a real tough kid, a leather worker from Boston. Strait put forward this idea of calling his Thunderbolt Jersey Bounce. Watson replied, "We can't do that." And Donald Strait, who had enlisted in his state's National Guard before joining up formally with the US Army Air Forces, and later on served long into the post-war years with the New Jersey Air National Guard, is commemorated by this Australian-built Mustang of fighter aviation engineering.
And if you look away to your left-hand side as the Mustang is making its approach to land, you see that very curved fighter approach to the airfield. Well, if you imagine you're sat in the cockpit of a Mustang and looking forward, you have very little forward visibility, especially when the aircraft comes into landing attitude and the nose gets higher and higher. Virtually no forward visibility, kind of like driving with your bonnet up. So many of these fighters make what we call the curved fighter approach, which is staying very tight to the runway, turning very tightly towards it, so you can at least keep sight of the runway for as long as possible, in this case out to the left-hand side of the canopy, and then kicking the aircraft straight at the last minute, looking left and right, hoping to see the edges of the runway, and then all should be well. And also, so just looking ahead to what we have planned for you in the next hour or so. Next display item should be the vintage pair, 2 Chipmunks. And as we head towards about 10 to 2, we're going to have a very special appearance by the F-35B from the Royal Air Force, the Lightning II. We then have another short but sweet overseas contribution in the form of the MRTT, the multi-role tanker transport, followed on by, again, one of the highlights, certainly for me today, which will be the Dutch Spitfire. And then as we get towards 2:30, again from our friends overseas, the Polish F-16, followed by some fast and furious aerobatics by Melanie in the extra 330. And then as we head towards 3 o'clock, we'll go back to that very famous
Chipmunk T10s, and they make up the vintage pair. You might have gone flying in or flown a Chipmunk in the past. You can, in fact, fly in the leading aircraft of this pair because they offer air experience flights in this very one from its base at Havilland Aerodrome.
And indeed, His Majesty the King learned to fly in a Chipmunk.
Yes, one that still exists and is based at Old Warden in Bedfordshire.
And in addition to the vintage pair, I think we have at least 2 other Chipmunks in the showground. A Portuguese Chipmunk, a regular visitor, but also in the centre of the showground where we have our nice arrangement of training aircraft throughout the years. Of course, you couldn't do that without a Chipmunk. You just couldn't.
This aircraft was designed as a replacement for the de Havilland Tiger Moth biplane elementary trainer for both the RAF and the Royal Canadian Air Force, this being a product, the Chipmunk, of de Havilland's Canadian arm. But it was also to be produced by de Havilland at its plants in Britain, at Hatfield in Hertfordshire, and at Harden, which we were talking about earlier, the birthplace of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flights, Lancaster, as well as there being production in Canada. It was designed by a Polish emigre, one Zivron Jakimiuk, who was the chief engineer of de Havilland Canada. And Francis St. Barb, who was a director of de Havilland here in the UK, is reported to have said to Jakimiuk, "If you can make a good trainer, I will sell it." And didn't he make good that promise? Around 1,280 of these aeroplanes ended up being built, most of them in the UK, but just over 215 of them in Canada, and 66 by OGMA, the Portuguese state aircraft factory. It was important that this aircraft be developed as cost effectively as possible because it first flew in 1946 in Toronto. Most governments at that time that were potential Chipmunk buyers to replace Tiger Moths and the like didn't have much money. We certainly didn't, to buy new trainers. There were lots of surplus trainers still available, left over from wartime. Lots of countries were effectively bankrupt after so many years of global hostilities. But nonetheless, this aircraft, this monoplane as opposed to a biplane, found a very important market worldwide. And it was such a big advance over the Tiger Moth as well, because it had things like flaps and brakes and a radio and an enclosed cockpit, especially today. Well, it looks, much to my pleasure, as if they've actually got...
10-15 years ago, based in Scotland,
yes.
We had them display at Lucas a few times.
Yes, I've seen the likes of John Romaine and Lee Proudfoot perform formation arrows in Chipmunks at Duxford, but this, as I say, a new departure for the vintage pair this year. An initial 3 loops. And turning tightly as they come up to the right-hand end of the display line, and of course maintaining close formation, Andy, in low-powered aircraft like this, very challenging.
You can't just open the throttle and suddenly accelerate or hit the brakes and suddenly slow down. You've got to, in aviation we often talk about being ahead of the jet. We've certainly got to be ahead of the gypsy here. about what you need to do now. It's far, far too late.
A beautiful line of stern barrel roll there, so named because they're basically describing the inside outline of an imaginary barrel positioned on its side in the sky. The first Chipmunks were delivered to the RAF 75 years ago this year to the Oxford University Air Squadron at Kidlington. This type is still on RAF charge because the Battle of Britain Memorial flight at RAF Coningsby has 2 of these aircraft for tail dragger conversion and refresher purposes. In fact, there are Chipmunks on the strength of all 3 of the historic flights, the military historic flights in Britain. Now, those 2 now the only ones still on the military register because the Royal Navy historic flight is no more. Navy Wings Heritage Flight, they're represented here. They still have a Chipmunk, and we've got the historic Army aircraft flight Chipmunk. It used to be the Army Air Corps historic aircraft flight when it was in military hands, here in the static display.
And even in its primary role, certainly with university air squadrons and air experience flights, it stayed in service to the end of the 1990s. I mean, that's an incredible record.
Yeah, 1996 was when the final ones were retired by the AEFs, at that stage in favour of the Scottish Aviation Bulldog, which would also replace them with the University Air Squadrons. And then, of course, now we have the Grob Tutor in this role. Still in service with the Army Air Corps until 1997 with their basic fixed-wing flight at Middle Ward. But we mustn't forget the other roles Chipmunks played in RAF service. One of the most famous was clandestine photographic reconnaissance with the RAF Gatto station flight in what was then West Berlin. The Allies had the right to fly around the Berlin control zone, and they used the opportunity for reconnaissance with various helicopters, but also light aeroplanes like a fleet of Chipmunks. And one of the last Gatto station flight Chipmunks is one of the 2 with the Battle of Britain Memorial flight today. In towards us for a lovely crossing break. Nice to see 2 colour schemes represented here, Andy. The earlier silver with the yellow training bands, and the later red and white.
Indeed, the red and white for me is the sort of real characteristic colour scheme for this aircraft.
Yes, it's the one I grew up seeing Chipmunks in, flying from RAF Cosford in Norfolk, flying air cadets during the summer.
I think we used to call it support command colours.
Support command, absolutely. The Chipmunk was always a super display aeroplane as they come in for a crossover. The Havilland test pilot Pat Fillingham used to put on fantastic aerobatic displays of Chipmunks at Farnborough back in the 1950s, and there were later several display teams of them in the British military, the Blue Chips and the Skylarks in the RAF, and later, my favourite, was the Grey Owls of the Army Air Corps, so named because of the age of the pilots, who included some incredibly distinguished test pilots carrying on flying but performing basic flying grading for the Army.
As was of course done on the air experience flights, of which this aircraft was a stalwart, obviously, where so many retired air officers would see out their careers in instructing, taking cadets for their first experience. You sit next to Flying Officer Smith and you realise, no, it's Air Vice Marshal.
Yeah. mentioned how it's still used by the BBMF, the Chipmunk, also, and represented by the one leading this pair here, still used by all sorts of civilian operations for much the same purpose as it has ever been used, providing elementary tailwheel training. And we've said this often about a few aircraft in today's show, but have you ever heard anyone say much of a bad word about the Chipmunk's handling?
Absolutely not, absolutely not. Certainly one of those aircraft that just had enough about it to not let you get lured into a false sense of security, which is just what you want in a training aircraft.
Another very fine break right on the display datum. Yeah, that's the key thing, and that's something we'll come on to with the Harvard later. That is a terrible old cliche, I know, but easy to fly, difficult to fly well and accurately, but it is true. Very true. One of the Shuttleworth collection pilots, Richard Crockett, wrote that flying a Chipmunk is quite simply one of the most fantastic aviation experiences you can have, and quite a lot of people have compared it to being a mini Spitfire, almost, in some respects. One of the things I'm finding really impressive about this display, quite a lot of brakes, immediate and very snappy rejoins.
It's not just very well flown, it's been very well put together. There's a lot of thought gone into this.
Yeah. The Red and White aircraft in this pair was built at the de Havilland plant at Havilland in Chester, served with all sorts of units until its retirement in the second half of the 1990s. And there's a really good illustration in this aircraft of the sort of progression a pilot can undertake on an aeroplane such as this, because when it was retired from the RAF, it was bought by the Higgins family, and John Higgins, the number 2 in this team, who we've seen display at Cosford individually and in this pair several times, was at one stage the youngest holder in the UK of a display authorisation from the Civil Aviation Authority. He was aged just 20 when he got his first DA. He's now got several hundred hours on Chipmunks and must be one of the most seasoned Chipmunk display pilots in the country. And you'll see they're staying in close formation now as their sequence comes to an end. And I expect we're going to see a very nice close formation landing. And if it's anything like the landings I've seen them do as a pair at other events, it could well be a rather nice side-slipped formation landing.
It's certainly a very tight approach. I mentioned the Mustang making a curved fighter approach. There's good reason for that aircraft with the lack of forward view. I think the vintage pair are doing it because they can.
Well, they're in the end. The vintage pair. Go on, move your head. The guys from that video of them landing. Yeah. You better get a good video of it. I'm literally about to fall into
Well, I thought that was an absolutely splendid display by the vintage pair. David Petters in the lead, John Higgins, the number 2, with their pair of de Havilland Canada Chipmunk T10s. Utter nostalgia, but a wonderful display in the present day. Sponsors today, Lockheed Martin. But thanks, as I say, to our other supporters, BAE, RTX, Leonardo, Rolls-Royce, Canon, University of Wolverhampton, Babcock, Shepherd, Blackstone Jaguar, Winlock Water, Adventure 001, and Orderum Gaming Cafe. Thanks to all our sponsors and supporters, we really appreciate you. And we also appreciate the cadets from UBAS who've been providing hospitality and general assistance throughout the show. They've really done a great job, so thank you to them. The Beech 18 cleared for takeoff as well. A very useful twin radial engined, light transport, particularly of the Second World War years, used. Here's the Royal Netherlands Air Force historic flight example of the Beech 18 on takeoff.
As soon as it gets warm, we take the stuff off, and then it gets cold. Where'd you go?
Why has he got into this?
System, enabling maximum operational flexibility. And there it is for this very rare appearance. Out to our left, the NATO multinational multi-role tanker unit, Airbus A330.
first for Cosford. And there you can see the probe has been extended. Here in the UK we tend to favour a different way. We use the probe and drogue as opposed to the flying boom that you see here. It's an aircraft capable of using both methods to refuel.
Now we stick with Dutch contributions to today's show.
Positioning now for its last manoeuvre from the Royal Netherlands Air Force historic flight, the Spitfire.
An incredible survivor, not just because of all of those combat operations it undertook towards the end of World War II, but also from what happened after it, because it was used as an airfield decoy for a time at Eindhoven, and then number 14 Squadron of the RAF, quotes, liberated it. If you heard Juice's interview with Jonathan that we put out before the show, other terms are available for what happened to the aircraft, but they liberated it and took it to their base at Oldenburg and then to Gütersloh, and it ended up coming back in an RAF Shorts Belfast to Bryce Norton in 1969. and airframe strength. Sharp and precise. Coming from the left, the Falcon turn. Tight, climbing spiral, and shows the jet engine. Under high lobes, perfectly balanced by the fly-by-wire system. Every 90 degrees, showcasing perfect roll control. Flap, wrist adapts, versus line, upside down above the shoreline, and iconic moment of precision line. Now, back into motion, loaded barrel rolls, tight rolling barrel slow under high speed, fast and clean. Nose held high. This is high alpha class. Flying with nearly 30 degrees angle of attack, just above stall speed. At midfield, full afterburner and vertical rocket-like climb. Then a slicing return at over 1,200 km per hour. And now, final salute from the Tiger. One last high-speed pass to say goodbye, with gratitude, power, and pride. Civilian version, a very smart one indeed. And here she is, getting airborne Melanie Astles with the extra EA330. And straight on to the knife edge with smoke on as she starts her display. A very uncomfortable negative G pushover there. In a sequence that's a very high octane combination of classic aerobatic figures and manoeuvres from a typical freestyle competition aerobatic program. Melanie discovered aerobatics in 2006. Just a year later, she won her first title, the French Sportsman Level Championship. There are various different levels of aerobatic competition flying, and that was the beginning of her career, which has seen multiple French national titles and international ones as well. She was an Airbus A320 pilot for her national airline Air France, but she decided to leave to focus on aerobatics and also her company Airmel, which specialises in communications, sponsorship and aircraft sales and rentals. She also represents various other organisations through her aerobatic flying. She was the best placed woman pilot in the 2023 Advanced Level World Championships, and then last year she won the British International Open Aerobatic Championship, becoming British National Champion and the first British, or in her case Franco-British woman, to stand on a mixed international podium with an FAI medal. That's the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, the world governing body for sport aviation, including aerobatics. Rolling in the vertical, then a few turns of a spin, a 4-point hesitation roll showing us the very crisp handling of the extra, as Melanie then pulls vertical once again into a half loop with a series of knife edge tumbles at the top. 2.5 turns of that, a figure often referred to as a roulade. Pulling vertical once again with a hesitation roll on the way up. The speed once again bleeds off. And here she descends into a knife edge spin. One and a quarter rolls there, heading towards you. Descending slightly to turn through 180 degrees back onto the display line.
multiple further rolls, and then a hard 90-degree negative G turn. Heading into a vertical climb, which I expect to terminate in a negative flick eventually. Exiting inverted, again very, very uncomfortable for her. Continuing into and through the vertical. And a complete outside loop described there before heading back away from us. Inverted again, and once again pushing up, remaining inverted. Ouch, that looks very uncomfortable indeed. A flick roll at the apex. A 4-point hesitation roll, an upward 45-degree line, followed by a tumble, and now that excellent power to weight ratio comes into its own as Melanie brings the extra 330 into effectively a hover, very nose high. It's no less at the famous Indy Motor Speedway in 2017. This aircraft very much at the cutting edge of the modern unlimited aerobatic art. An extended rolling tail slide. Coming towards the end of an absolutely exceptional display of individual aerobatics here. Hesitation there on the diving 45 onto the A-axis again, pulling up. A series of rolls and then a brief push into negative G, and again hanging it on the prop. See now at slower speed to come back past you, and another very impressive knife edge pass. Reversing again to show you the upper surfaces and your chance to give her a wave at this end of the crowd line as she passes by. A further vertical roll. This is such a varied display of different figures, but interspersed with these nice low, close passes. Backwind at high speed and low level, and a brief wing rock down the line to finish her display. Well, what about that? Or not quite finishing her display. A further series of wing rocks, a further flick roll,
And that does now complete her display. She's just told air traffic. Absolutely fantastic. I must say, I've never seen Melanie perform before today, and I am suitably impressed.
Just when you think you've seen everything an extra can do, Melanie comes along and rewrites the book.
Yeah, that was really, really good.
So Melanie will be landing back with us. I think she's just taking a nice gentle circuit, let her eyeballs stop spinning. Let the G wash off, because it's been moving in every direction. A landing is one of those things where you do often just have to take that moment just to let everything calm down, get back into that straight zone, if you like, after those amazing tumbles and the speed and everything. It's just good to let everything settle down. We have time in the programme just to finish the display in a beautiful, safe manner.
Yeah, she'll be taxiing up to a parking spot, I think in front of the crowd line, so ample opportunity for those of you down near there to show her how much you enjoyed that display. And a tremendous ambassador, as I was saying, for women in aviation, something we all absolutely, wholeheartedly support. And as I say, Melanie now coming into land, and you'll have your chance to meet her at 4 o'clock. She's going to be doing a signing, Andy, down by the catwalk area.
Well, that's a lovely thing to do, because meet the pilots is such an important thing. It's often quite difficult for operational reasons in that
P330.
So now if you look to your left-hand side, the next display item is already rolling, just getting airborne. This is the T6 Texan in the UK aircraft. Just getting airborne now will be the next display item. First thing to mention is that very distinctive engine sound. This is a radial engine. The cylinders are arranged in a circular fashion around the crankshaft, and it does create, at certain times in the flight, that very nice growl. So this aircraft, T6 Texan, single-engined advanced trainer aircraft that was used to train fighter pilots of the United States Army Air Forces, the United States Navy, our own Royal Air Force, and many other air forces of the British Commonwealth during World War II. Officially known as the Texan, but as I mentioned, we often knew it as the Harvard.
Now, we were talking earlier, Andy, weren't we, about the Chipmunk being a very long-serving aeroplane, and the same goes for this, because it entered RAF service in 1931, back then in fixed undercarriage guise, rather than with the retractable gear that most Harvards have. The last one on military charge.
The aircraft designs flew once or twice and completely sank without any trace. Over 17,000 have been built.
Not just by North American, the original manufacturer, but by companies like Canadian Car Foundry, and in this case, another Canadian manufacturer, Grob. And this is a Harvard 2B model, which is today operated by Hurricane Heritage and the West London Aero Club at White Waltham in Berkshire. And this this aircraft, Andy, really typifies what I was saying about how useful a Harvard still is, and one reason why there are so many of them around, because this dates from 1942, this aircraft. So it's one of the older Harvards still around in airworthy condition. Built in Montreal, it served in Ontario as part of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, which I think we'll probably come back to. Then went to the Swedish Air Force. For a long time it was a ground instructional airframe. It was returned to flight in Sweden, but then in 2016 it was bought by a chap called James Brown to aid his training on the Battle of Britain veteran Mark I Hurricane that he'd just bought. He set up an organisation called Hurricane Heritage to operate it. His dream, although he said, no, if I'm not good enough to be able to do it, I won't mind, was to get to fly the Hurricane. He was a private pilot, but he didn't have tail dragger experience. He gradually went through that program, of which this aircraft is a vitally important part. And guess what? He's now displaying the Hurricane, flying it a great deal, flying it into the big warbird backbones in Duxton, Headcorn and elsewhere. So much of that down to the
That's a great story. Well, as you mentioned, it does today what it did during the 30s and 40s, bridging that gap between the elementary fighters of the day, mainly the Tiger Moth back then, and the frontline fighters, the Spitfires, the Hurricanes, the Mustangs. In today's terminology, the Royal Air Force, this is a hawk. It fills that gap. It's the one that takes you from learning basic airmanship to transitioning you onto the frontline fighters.
And why did it do all of that so well? Well, it was such an excellent advanced trainer for all sorts of reasons. Pretty powerful with those 600 its handling characteristics similar to the fighters that you would move on to. Crucially, as we were saying about the Chipmunk, it could bite if a student wasn't careful. Not an aircraft to get low and slow in, according to one warbird pilot I spoke to. And there's the ground handling aspect of handling a powerful tail dragger. It needs to be flown accurately in terms of your speed in the circuit, and your footwork once you're on the ground on the rudder pedals has to be pretty dexterous to stop it ground looping.
And worth remembering, back in the late 1930s and early 40s, Spitfires, Hurricanes and Mustangs were all single-seaters. Today we have two-seaters. Back then they got all single seats, so for some time you had to strap yourself into a Spitfire on your own, get it airborne, fly it around the circuit and land it again with no help whatsoever. So this aircraft tried to, being an instructional aircraft, a two-seater, was just trying to give you that feel of what this is going to be like. But when you read some of the classic books, Geoffrey Whelan especially, his description of flying the Harvard and then getting into a Spitfire for the first time.
Yeah, because not all warbird pilots now go through the two-seat warbird stage. Of course, James Brown, the owner of this aircraft, or the part owner of this aircraft now, is a case in point. He didn't fly a two-seat Hurricane before he started flying his Hurricane. So yeah. The other thing was it could be armed with guns, practice bombs, rockets for armament training, so it was very versatile as a trainer, used in huge numbers by the Empire and later the British Commonwealth Air Training Plans. The idea of those being that training was moved out of the UK to places where it could be less easily disrupted by enemy action. And it was an enormous program. In Canada alone, more than 50,000 pilots passed through that plan's facilities. And it wasn't just pilots, it was all members of all sorts of multi-crew aircraft crews. 167,000 odd air crew passed through the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan.
It's so often the way that advanced trainers are forced into a light combat role. Happens very often. As you say, it's very much involved in combat. We use them in Kenya, again, at Mau Mau, in the 1950s, France in the Algerian War, Portugal as well during the Portuguese colonial war. Could be armed with machine guns and also some fairly small sort of 20-25 pound bombs.
Yeah, and they were used as forward air controllers in the Korean War, the role we were talking about to some extent with the Bird Dog earlier on by the US Air Force between 1950 and 53.
Also quite often used in different disguises in film roles, of course. I'm thinking of Tutor, as the Zero,
yes,
and also as a sort of non-specific ground attack aircraft in A Bridge Too Far, quite early on when Horrocks' 30 Corps get bogged down in the early part of the ground war, where they call up the ground attack aircraft with purple smoke. They are definitely harming.
Yes, there are several harbours on strength of the Royal Netherlands Air Force historic flight, whose Spitfire and Beech we saw earlier, and several of those, I think, were involved in that filming. Nearly 15,500 of these aeroplanes in all variants were built, and it wasn't just with the British Armed Forces that they served for a very long time. The South African Air Force brought its first Harvards into service in 1940. It retired the last in 1995. And they had 55 still on service for a farewell flight pass to mark 55 years of use on retirement. And that was far longer than we used them for as trainers for sort of everyday Air Force use. The final wings course, the course on which RAF pilots get their wings to pass out on the Harvard, did so as far back as 1955, but they soldiered on, as I said, at Boscombe Down, supporting task work, also used by the Royal Navy Historic Flight for a little while as an advanced tail dragger trainer.
Operating in a tail-dragging aircraft is a very different experience. There's so many different forces that are at play. We keep talking about and kept on strength to teach people how to fly tail draggers because they are quite rare today, and it's a very difficult skill.
Typified by this aeroplane coming in for its final pass before departing the Nordine Harvard 2B. Heading back to its base at White Waltham in Berkshire in the hands of Mike Collett. And Mike's someone else who's built up to fly.
So please put your hands together for the 2025 Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team. It's the Red Arrows! Red One pulls up at over 400 miles per hour and it converts the team from battle formation to a world famous Diamond 9. The aircraft slows to approximately about 120 miles per hour, reaching a height of over 5,500 to 6,000 feet, as Red One brings that Diamond 9 down and bends it round to the right. Red One this year, once again for his second year as a team leader, is squad leader John Bond, known as Bondy. Bondy's actually done 7 years in the team. He did 5 years in Reds 2 to 9, taking a year out and then becoming Red 1 last year. He's a former Typhoon pilot and he also flew the Tucano as a qualified flying instructor, where he flew the Tucano display aircraft in 2012. Now moved into 9 Arrow. The smoke will come on once again. It's the Red Arrows! On the right hand side of Red 1 is Red 2, that's Flight Lieutenant Rob Thomas. Rob is in his first year on the team. He was taken from training and made straight into instructor on the Hawk T1 with 208 Squadron at RAF Valley. He then completed his training and moved to the Typhoon Force, where he served on 3 Squadron on operations over Iraq and Syria, as well as an instructor on 29 Squadron, the operational conversion unit, all based at RAF Coningsby. You now see those wings, all the even numbers on the right, or the odd numbers on the left, make themselves make rearwards in one of the widest formations that we fly. As the squad formation rolls out, this is the Swan. You can hear those commands from Red 1, and they're almost robotic and monotone in that delivery. And that's because we fly our formation by ear rather than by eye. This means that the pilots on the outside of the formation are putting their inputs in just a little bit earlier than those on the inside to ensure that the formation moves as one rather than a ripple effect down the wing. You now see Reds 8 and 9 slip behind the rest of the formation to form once again the shape of one of the most iconic aircraft ever to flow in history. From the left, the smoke comes on in the Concorde. On the left-hand side of that centre stem, closest in at the front, is Red 3, Flight Lieutenant Andrew McEwen, known as Macca. Macca again is in his first year on the team. He's previously flown the AV-8B, a Harrier variant with, on exchange, United States Marine Corps, before then returning back to the UK and flying our newest aircraft, the 5th generation F-35B, with 617, the Dambusters at RAF Marham. You now see Reds 2 and 3 make their way forwards and the rest of the formation to form a Delta formation. And in celebration of 20 years of the Royal Air Force Typhoon display team, from the right, this is Typhoon! Typhoon being the Royal Air Force mainstay aircraft on operations all across the world, both Iraq and Syria, as well as the Eastern European Air Policing Patrol. On the back of that formation, all the way at the far right, is Red 4, Squadron Leader Chris McCann. An extremely hard position for him to fly because, again, we take our formation references from Red 1. And not necessarily the aircraft on the inside of him. He's looking at all through that formation, taking that reference as Red 1. Chris McCann is in his second year of the team. Once again, he was taken from training and made an instructor on the Takano before joining the TR4 Tornado Force, where he got an AFC for his service on operations over Afghanistan. Coming in from the left to celebrate the Royal Air Force new capability in space and cyber, this is Apollo. There are 11 pilots in the team. You have Reds 1 through 9 displayed in front of you. We are, of course, commanded by Officer Commanding RAF Red 11 Wing Commander Adam Collins, former Tornado GR4 pilot. Also flew the Hawk in the Aggressor Royal with 100 Squadron and an F-111 while on exchange with the Royal Australian Air Force. And Wing Commander Collins is in his final year as Red 11. You now see him split once again with Red 6 and 7 in trail. Royal Air Force Cosford, get your cameras ready for the colourful and noisy Big Vixen. You may be able to see on the back of the aircraft, underneath towards the back, the air brakes are out. That's a small door sticker taken out the belly of the aeroplane. In certain manoeuvres we fly with the air brake out. It makes the pilots fly with a higher throttle setting, thereby producing a hotter engine gas temperature. It makes the smoke burn a lot more brightly, and it also creates an air disturbance outside the back of the aeroplane, making that smoke billow a lot more fuller, and therefore in certain manoeuvres we use it to enhance those manoeuvres. You'll now see Reds 6 and 7 sit behind Red 1 in the stem, Reds 8 and 9 in trail, as they come around to right for one of the most popular, if not the most popular, the Red Arrows fly. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get your cameras ready. It's tornado time! Eight and 9 roll goes. Reds 8 and 9 roll around the rest of formation. Watch for the colour change as Red 1 brings them down the line. As I said, 11 pilots in the team. We've talked about Red 11, myself, Red 10. This is my 4th and final year on the team. A former Tornado GR4 pilot, as well as being a qualified flying instructor on the Hawk T-Mark II. But of course the Red Arrows is not just about the pilots. We have a team of over 140 personnel. Over 120 of them are the engineers, the logisticians, the visual communicators, the administrators, and they are known as the Blues due to the colour of their blue flying coveralls. And of course there are a number of Blues here today at our public relations tent at the far end of the showground, so please pop along, say hello, find out about their careers in the Royal Air Force Aerobatic team and the wider Royal Air Force. You'll see Reds 8 and 9 have now joined the rest of the formation, and this will be your last opportunity to catch the Red Arrows in our world famous Diamond 9. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from the left in the Diamond 9, the Red Arrows. As we start the second half, it's the more dynamic, heart-pumping, jaw-dropping formation, and we start it with the same formation as last year. It's the 5-4 split. And in the second half, we now operate in 2 distinct sections. Off to the left, you've got Reds 1 through 5, known as Enid, named after Enid Blyton's famous 5. And off to the right, Reds 6, 7, 8 and 9, known as Hannah, named after Squadron Leader Ray Hannah, one of the first members of the Red Arrows. He's the first team leader to lead the team for 4 years. He took the team from a 7 to a 9 and formed our world famous Diamond 9. Enid from the left, Hannah from the right for the colourful 5-4 cross. As Hannah disappeared to our left, keep your eye on Enid, who come round to the left and stay in show centre. You'll see Red 4 coming in from the right to sit behind Red 1 and Red 5 in trail on Enid. Number 5, roll go, as number 5 rolls around the smoke of Enid in the Twister. Red 5 is Flight Lieutenant Dustin Wales, known as Dusty. Dusty is in his second year of the team, originally from Zimbabwe. He joined the Royal Air Force and through training became a Typhoon pilot. He flew with 11 Squadron, 41 Squadron, the Test and Evaluation Squadron, before becoming an instructor on 29 Squadron, all based at RAF Coningsby. Look directly to your front and you'll see the smoke of Hannah running back in, looking for the red and blue from Reds 8 and 9. Get your cameras ready for the Hannah break. Red 6 and 8 to our left hand side, Red 7 and 9 to our right hand side. Hannah and the synchro pair are led by Red 6, the synchro leader, squadron leader Tom Hansford. Tom is in his third and final year on the team, a former Typhoon pilot and qualified weapons instructor on the Typhoon, where he was responsible for teaching all weapon tactics and technical information to the Typhoon force. And Squadron Leader Hansford received a DFC for services on operations over Iraq and Syria. Each pair will now dive down to only 100 feet above the airfield. They have a closing speed of over 800 to 900 miles per hour in the Hannah Pass. Red 8 and 9 go up and down in roller coasters with 7 and 6 staying flat. Red 7 off to our right, Red 6 off to our left, pulling up now up to 6G, making everything about them weigh 6 times heavier. To our right hand side is Red 7, Flight Lieutenant George Hobday. He is in his second year on the team, and once again he was taken from training, made an instructor on the Tucano, before joining the Typhoon force where he flew with 12 squadron based at RAF Cosford. As the synchro pair complete the manoeuvre called the Boomerang. Once again, each aircraft passing only 30 metres, that's 100 feet, wingtip to wingtip, pulling hard to disappear to our front. Look to your right hand side and you're looking for Enid as they come in, the smoke will come on and they will settle themselves down in an inverted V. Look to your left hand side, you've got Red 9 smoking red as he flies to Enid in the Goose. Red 9 settling. Ollie is in his third year on the team. He's a former Tornado GR4 pilot and former qualified flying instructor on the Hawk T-Mark II. As Enid disappears to our left hand side, look directly to your fare, led by Red 6. You can just see their nose lights twinkling in the distance as Red 6 pulls up Red 7 in tango formation. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get your cameras ready. This is the one you do not want to miss. It's the world famous Synchro Heart. And coming in from the top right to spear the heart is Red 8. Red 8 is Flight Lieutenant Richard Walker, an experienced aviator, having flown the Harrier as well as the Typhoon, as well as being a qualified flying instructor on the Hawk T-Mark II. Let's give the synchro pair and Red 8 a massive round of applause for wonderful horse over the skies of Royal Air Force Cosford. Keep your eye on Red 6 and Red 7 as they come back towards the display line. Once again, at only 100 feet, a closing speed of over 900 miles per hour. Each aircraft will perform a barrel roll at about 100 feet before crashing in a second barrel roll in a manoeuvre simply called the double rolls. As the synchro pair disappear to our rear, look to your left hand side. Coming in from the left hand side is Enid, now joined by Reds 8 and 9. As I said, Red 1 has the option to go full, flat or rolling, and he changes that decision through the show depending on the cloud base. And he is staying with the flat and rolling show, coming in from the left with Corkscrew. A great opportunity to see our red, white and blue, which is only capable due to the smoke pod under the belly of the aeroplane. producing approximately 5 white smoke, 1 minute of red smoke and 1 minute of blue smoke. Those smoke colours are selectable by their own button on the pilot's control column, and through the winter training we come up with a smoke plan so we do not have a mistake or get the wrong colour at the wrong time in the display. Red 7 from the right, red 6 from the left, barrel rolling back down to 100 feet, full crossing in the centre for the circus. Once again, passing only 30 metres, switching colour from white to blue and red. They're pulling hard up to 6G to cross once again at the back of the circle. Note that the red becomes blue, the blue becomes red as they cross back towards the centre of the show display, completing the manoeuvre called circus. Look to your front right 45, you can see Enid start to pull in the white smoke in trail. And once again our famous red, white and blue comes on as red 1 performs a barrel roll in the sky, leaving a snake-like smoke trail in the sky in the Serpent. I mentioned earlier about the blues. We are lucky to have 11 individuals who fly in the back of our aircraft in between displays when we cannot take the full engineering complement. They are known as circus. One individual with me at every display is Circus 10, that's AS1 Erin Lewis. And he's out there today filming the display for safety and debriefing purposes. You'll now see reds 2, 3, 4 and 5 move up alongside red 1, now looking left and right along their shoulder line at red 1, while maintaining 3 to 4G. The smoke will come on for the tango. As Enid leaves to our front left, you're looking to the left now for red 6 and 9, red 7 and 8 from the right hand side. For one of our new manoeuvres for 2025, red 6 and 9 now roll inverted, working hard against that negative G in the manoeuvre called chainsaw. Red 6 and 9 inverted for no more than 30 seconds, all the blood rushing to their brains. Fighting hard against that negative G, making that G suit work extremely hard, and then rolling the correct way up with a small amount of positive G to lead the display area to our front. Cast your eyes now to the left hand side, you can see the nose lights coming in from Enid. 2 and 3, roll, go. There's 2 and 3, roll to the outside. Clear, go, as reds 4 and 5 roll to the outside. It's one of the hardest manoeuvres for our new pilot, Tutor, the master. As Enid leaves to our right hand side, look directly to your front. Once again, you're looking for the aircraft of Hannah. Looking for reds 8 and 9, smoking the red and blue, rolling around red 6 for those at show centre. You should be able to see red 6 rolled round by reds 8 and 9. As red 7 hides in the smoke of red 6 in the Tempest. Once again, red 7 and 9 off to our right hand side, red 6 and 8 to our left hand side. The synchro pilot once again will pull up to approximately 1,000 to 1,500 feet, turn back towards the display line, for their final manoeuvre of the show. Once again, each aircraft down only 100 feet. That closing speed of over 800 miles per hour. Each aircraft will perform a barrel roll, followed by inverted flight in a manoeuvre called the crossbow. Look to your front, you're looking for the nose lights of Enid, now joined by Reds 8 and 9. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get your cameras ready. Please put your hands together for the 2025 Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team. It's the Red Arrows! Red Wolf will now put his smoke on. He'll gather up the rest of the formation and they will make their way back to our home base at Royal Air Force Waddington in Lincolnshire. If you enjoyed our display, please look us up online. We have our own Facebook page and Instagram page, Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team Red Arrows, RAF Red Arrows on Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like any more information about the pilots, you can follow me, RAF Red 10 on Instagram, and you'll be able to find all the rest of the pilots.
So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, look to your right hand side for the second time this afternoon, the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Memorial Flight.
final victory roll there from the Battle of Britain veterans, Spitfire 2 of the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Another very nice contribution from them. And Mark 80A versions of the British Aircraft Corporation Strikemaster. And here they come in from the right.
So although the basic design of this aircraft was a trainer, as we've mentioned many times today, training aircraft often pressed into a light combat role. Well, this was pressed almost formally at the development of the Mark V jet provost trainer, which was really the ultimate example of the trainer version of the jet provost. Became the BAC 167 Strikemaster. I think at the time the British Aircraft Corporation thought that their aircraft might have another version in it as a kind of light attack counter-insurgency, and so it proved.
Yeah, a few countries were using jet provosts in different marks as light attack aircraft. BAC had the idea of this bespoke version, aiming to sell it to countries that weren't able to afford to buy or to operate more expensive, complex, bespoke front line types, while also being suitable still as an advanced jet trainer. So they strengthened the airframe, they gave it extra armour protection, fit an upgraded version of the Rolls-Royce Viper turbojet engine, and crucially 4 underwing weapons hardpoints, which can carry gun packs, bombs, drop tanks, and so forth.
Which we will see demonstrated towards the end of this display.
We will, because this is where we use up the pyrotechnics that were intended for the Army Air Corps roll demonstration that sadly, for technical reasons, with the Apaches, we're not able to see today. So the Strikemasters will be showing us something of their original in-service roll. The Royal Saudi Air Force became the first customer for this aircraft. It had 47 of them. 146 were built. They were used not just by the Saudis, but by South Yemen, Oman, Kuwait, Botswana, Singapore, Kenya, New Zealand, Ecuador, and Sudan. And a few of those used them in anger in combat. Ecuador did so, South Yemen, but particularly Oman. Very nice little manoeuvre here, coming towards on the 45-degree line, and both doing a roll under in order to turn away. Lieutenant Sultan of Oman's Air Force, now the Royal Air Force of Oman, used its Strikemasters a great deal in a conflict known as the Dhofar Rebellion. Communist-backed rebel forces, known as the Adu in the local language, meaning the enemy, were trying to take over the Dhofar province of Oman from the control of the Sultanate. And in combating those efforts, the Strikemaster proved a very effective weapon. It was a big step up in offensive capability for the Omani air arm, particularly compared with the piston engine personal provost it replaced. Having a jet for this role was crucial in terms of allowing the aircraft to return to a combat zone much more quickly than the piston-engined provosts and get that support for ground troops that much more rapidly. Plus, of course, the armament was far more potent. They could carry 32 Sura rockets, or a combination of 16 of those rockets and a pair of 540-pound bombs, as well as the two 7.62mm machine guns. They also had a rudimentary night attack capability, which later was made possible through using target illuminating flares. And there was the role as the show of force, very important in all sorts of conflicts over the years. A major demoralising effect was had on the enemy forces. Navigation lights on as the two Strikemasters run in straight in front of us. And they're coming in for a break.
And indeed the deployment of Strikemasters during the Dover Rebellion, that story told so well in Roland White's book Stormfront. It really takes you into the cockpit. Indeed, I think 3 Strikemasters were lost during that action, the event, July 1972.
Yes, they provided close air support with those light rockets and with the guns for strafing to forces, which included elements of our own Special Air Service, the SAS.
In appalling weather as well.
This is not an all-weather aircraft. Now, the 2 aircraft coming in for an opposition run this time. Quite a lot of British contract pilots flew the Omani Strikemasters and the other types in Omani service for a good many years as well, didn't they?
Indeed.
Aircraft is a Mark 82A, which was built as late as 1986 for the Omanis, and it's been on the British Civil Register since 2005. The camouflaged one, an ex-Royal Saudi Air Force aircraft with a fuselage that was supplied to the Saudis as a Mark 80A, but wings from an Omani Mark 82A version, and those wings actually sustained some battle damage during the Battle of Mirbat.
I think if you look to your right-hand side, you'll see the aircraft demonstrating one of its weapon rolls, the 7.62mm strafe.
So many things, and some delayed action, heavier weaponry there.
I think they were sympathetic explosions. I think the strafe obviously hit some fuel or ammo dumps and dispatched them appropriately.
Get yourselves ready for the loudest of the loud bangs that we have for you as they come towards the end of their display, because this is where we're going to shortly unleash the wall of fire. Lining up their run-in on the enemy target. And as they pull up, they've delivered the coup de grace. That's a lot of firepower from 2 Strikemasters. It certainly was. And we ought to note, I think, Andy, that this is the first time we've had these 2 at Cosford since the death of the team's founder, the founder of North Wales Military Aviation Services, operator of these 2 aeroplanes, Mark Petrie, who sadly passed away in April. as I say, we've been back with us in quite a while actually. They've got quite a long hold. As I say, the Swordfish should be in the vicinity waiting for them while we enjoy the stylings of our second national team of the day, and an absolutely outstanding one. I love watching this next team, particularly in a slightly smaller venue like this one, where their display really fits into the confines superbly.
It's almost made to measure, I think, for Cosford. It just looks and feels so right in this sort of shape and size of arena.
And the same goes for a very good helicopter team routine, as we will see from the Wildcats. Off they go.
Nice to have them back as a pair.
Yeah,
It's been a while, and they've got to, yes, survive flying it. In the next 15 minutes or so, that could be quite interesting.
Amazing and internationally renowned PC-7 team of the Swiss Air Force. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great and unique Swiss Air Force PC-7 team. Pilatus PC-7 aircraft not only gives the team its name, but also make it the largest turboprop aerobatic team in the world. Dynamism, elegance and precision, that's what the Swiss PC-7 team stands for. With interactive formation changes and varying figures, these military pilots offer an extremely professional flying display and document the performance of the Swiss Air Force. You already observed the next formation change into the Super Flash, and now the next change into the formation called Delta, our largest formation, with a wingspan of around 70 meters, equal to an Airbus A380. And you can observe now the next formation change in only a few seconds. The new formation is ready now. This is called the propeller, and bear in mind that the distance between the aircraft is 3 to 4 meters at the speed of around 350 kilometers per hour. The next formation change into Artemis. It looks like a rocket and pay special attention to the two last aircraft. They will show us the so-called rovers on the left and right side, and that perform no less than 3 frontal crossings. The pilots of the PC-7 team are professional military pilots of the Swiss Air Force, and normally these pilots fly on the F-18 fighter aircraft. The activities related to the PC-7 team is their weekend works, so they are side jobs, so to say. So we have fighter jet pilots who, in addition to their main job, get together and prepare aircraft to perform this display. And we see the second crossing already now, and we expect the third crossing just in front of us. Very nice flown and
Now take a close look to the front left, the so-called rolling dice. Indeed, from the front you can see a dice with the number 5. 2 aircraft are circling around it, a really very elegant, almost romantic maneuver, the rolling dice of the PC-17. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for us to be here with you here at Cosford. I hear over the radio the pilots are having fun. They are quite concentrated, but they are really happy to fly here. And we expect already our soloist approaching from the right with a speed of around 500 kilometers per hour, and we will show us 2 half loopings. First half looping, then half a roll. He pulls up for the second half looping. Now the airspeed is decreasing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens if the PC-7 flies below its minimum flying speed. It gets into a spin, but don't worry, this is a standard maneuver every military pilot trains. And also our soloist is out of this uncomfortable situation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We expect the next highlights in the front of us. 8 aircraft are approaching after, again, our soloist coming back for roll, quarter roll. And now look to the front. We expect the other 8 aircraft, and they will present us not less than 4 crossings with 2 times 4 aircraft crossing each other. Actually, there will be 3 crossings. So now they arrive. 4 from the left, 4 from the right. Now absolute trust between the leaders of each formation is needed, and they will just cross in front of us. First crossing, now we await the second crossing. This is quite unique. 8 aircraft in the air crossing each other. Crossing just in front of us, and after this crossing, follow your eyes. The planes were flying away to the left side. They will show us again 4 loopings. And now I will get in contact. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Swiss precision at its best, and I will introduce these pilots to you. In the front, you find the leader of the PC-17, Captain Andreas Menk, nickname Mengster, followed by Lino Müller, nickname Rigi, then Captain Cedric Bissinger, nickname Mutzi, and in the back, Captain Simon Puri, nickname Happy. As I told you before, all experienced military F-18 fighter jet pilots of the Swiss Air Force. And approaching from the front right, the remaining 5 pilots of the sub-formation for the beautiful and highly elegant waterfall followed by a barrel roll. And let's listen as well to the leader's orders on the right hand side. I would also like to introduce these pilots to you in the front, the sub-leader of the PC-17, Captain Marius Enker, nicknamed Pneu, followed by Captain Yannick Lauper, nicknamed Sinti, then Captain Sandro Chinotti, nicknamed Yuri, then Pascal Haltenstein, nicknamed Aldi, and in the back our soloist Captain Silvan Andrecken, nicknamed Gollum. Thank you very much. And approaching from the left side, our formation called Super Mirror. The leader in the front is flying on his back. And we are continuing with the romantic part. Please look straight ahead. There we expect the 4 pilots to draw something very special for us in the sky of Cosford. So watch carefully. And if that's not enough, Airbus Arrow is also added by our soloist. This is the PC-17's declaration of love to you here in Cosford. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for us to fly here. Thank you. And we continue with the next spectacular crossing. 2 aircraft from the left, 2 from the right. Will show you the so-called collider crossing in front of us. Have your cameras ready. Go! And again our soloist approaching from the left side with a slow roll, difficult to fly without losing altitude. And it remains dynamic. Look to your right and to your left. There is 4 aircraft of course before. They will present us the so-called dogfight, 2 versus 2, 2 aircraft from the left and 2 from the right will present us a simulated air combat maneuver. Our formation called Batman, so get your eyes ready for the simulated air combat maneuver 2 versus 2. Batman, right. And not enough with the 4 aircraft, our soloist again is pulling through all the 4 aircraft into the sky for a short time, 0G at the top. And he pulls down again through all 4 aircraft. Our air combat maneuver by the Swiss Air Force PC-17. We continue from the front left. We are expecting each other, which sounds simple but definitely isn't. And don't forget, these aircraft are equipped with a propeller which you have to take special care of when flying so close. we continue with the dynamic part. So we will show you a new maneuver, the so-called roller coaster. One aircraft is approaching from the left, the other one from the right, and will draw something special again into the sky. These are our numbers 7 and 8 from the PC7 team, our two soloists, and we expect again a number 7 to come back and present us a so-called dirty roll. Why we call it dirty roll? Because the pilot flies this slow roll with the landing gear at flaps down, which is not the case with a normal clean roll. This requires very precise control of the aircraft with constant checking of speed and altitude, and as well of the allowed G values. Already approaching from the left side, 4 aircraft. They will present you 4 simultaneous loopings. Flying one looping is not extremely difficult, but with 4 simultaneous looping like this, it becomes quite demanding. So all pilots have to pull the stick with the same force, fly at the same speed and at the same angles to make it look even and precise. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We continue from the left side with our soloist. He will demonstrate you the maneuverability of the PC-7 aircraft. The PC-7 is equipped with a Pratt & Whitney turbine which delivers 550 horsepower. It has a maximum weight of 1,900 kilograms. This is equal to a medium-class passenger car. It reaches a maximum speed of 270 knots, and this is definitely faster than the fastest Ferrari or Porsche. And it has a climb rate of 10 meters per second. Compared to taking an elevator, it is doing 3 floors in 1 second. Since 1982, these PC-7 training aircraft have been in the service of the Swiss Air Force and are used for basic training of all the military pilots. So our soloist will now wave you goodbye. He will show you a tango. You can wave back to him with your hat or with your hand or whatever you wish. And like we know him, he doesn't have enough of flying. He shows us again another maneuver before he's coming back and present you again a tango. And here he comes again. And thank you very much to our number 7 to home. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, and we continue now with the next highlight of our show. You can observe in the front right the other 8 aircraft. They have extended again the landing gear, switched on the landing lights and extended their landing flaps. And formed a tunnel which allows us to our soloist approaching from the left side to cross this tunnel in any moment. Have a close look now. Hey. Swissness. The PC-17 presents the Swiss Cross, an extremely difficult formation to fly. More Swissness is hardly possible. Swiss pilots in Swiss-made planes flying the Swiss Cross, precisely and professionally flown, the PC-17 is a worthy ambassador of the Swiss Air Force and Swiss Armed Forces. We are approaching the end of our flight demonstration. I now hand over for the closing words to the leader of the PC-17, Captain Andreas Menk, called Maxter, and I switch directly into the cockpit.
Dear spectators at the RAF Cosford Air Show, live from the cockpit of the PC-17. It's a huge pleasure and honor for us to fly at this brilliant event. We hope you enjoyed our show and we wish you a fantastic afternoon. Bye-bye.
This was Captain Andreas Meknik, the Maxter, directly out of the front aircraft from the air. And now prepare your cameras for the final split of the Swiss Air Force PC-17 just in front of us.
Taranto, 21 of these biplane torpedo bombers flying from HMS Illustrious were involved. They effectively knocked the Italian fleet out of the rest of the war. In company with the Swordfish Mark I from the Navy Wing's Heritage Flight at Royal Naval Air Station Yeovilton in Somerset are two Leonardo Wildcat maritime attack helicopters operated by the Black Cats team of the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy, its official helicopter display team. The two Wildcats and the Black Cats team mounted by 825 Naval Air Squadron, and that squadron was itself a Swordfish operator, not least flying off HMS Victorious during the operations that led to the sinking of the German battleship Bismarck in 1941. But in then, from the right, the Swordfish and the two Wildcats of the Royal Navy's Taranto formation. In the RAF Museum Midlands here, you might well have gone to see the British Aircraft Corporation TSR-2, that cancelled 1960s strike aircraft, the history of which remains somewhat of a talking point to this day. Well, it wasn't the first TSR-2, because when Fairey developed a biplane torpedo bomber to meet an Admiralty specification for the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy in the early 1930s, it was dubbed the TSR-2, TSR standing in this instance for Torpedo Spotter Reconnaissance. It was based on their earlier TSR-1 design, but with a more powerful version of the Bristol Pegasus engine, slightly swept back wings, a longer rear fuselage, and the ability to operate on either wheels or floats. It was ordered in 1935 and named the Swordfish. Even by the standards of the time, it was quite basic in many ways. The crews were very exposed and they had no onboard heater. However, the aircraft's flying characteristics were very good, even when the aircraft were operating from heaving carrier decks in the open oceans. The Swordfish entered service with 825 Squadron, from which modern day unit these two Wildcats come, in July 1936. It soon came to dominate in the torpedo bomber role as far as the Fleet Air Arm was concerned. 13 squadrons were equipped with Swordfish on the outbreak of war in September 1939. But in many ways, the Fleet Air Arm should never have had to go to war with such an outdated aeroplane in a leading role. Heading in for a break. In many ways, the fact of the Swordfish being in service in such numbers when war broke out illustrates the sort of complacency and muddled procurement that often took place during the 1930s. This is an aircraft that has a cruising speed of just 90 knots or 104 miles an hour when it's lightly laden. That is reduced to 82 knots or 94 miles an hour with the underslung torpedo, and you can see this Swordfish is flying with a dummy torpedo under the fuselage. The crews had no accurate torpedo sight to calculate the all-important layoff that was required to aim the torpedo properly when attacking a moving target. Instead, all they had was a row of flashlight bulbs positioned on a bar level with the pilot's eye line. The distance between two of those bulbs represented 5 knots of speed at 1,000 yards, but there was no way of assessing the range from the target other than the pilot's experience. And thankfully, the Fleet Air Arm's torpedo bomber pilots had very regular practice to hone those skills. The Swordfish first went into combat in Norway in April 1940, flying both off carriers and on floats. Back home in 1940, as the Battle of Britain was fought, the Fleet Air Arm's squadrons were placed under the control of RAF Coastal Command, and Swordfish 85 years ago kept watch on enemy-held ports from which a German invasion of Britain could be launched. Sometimes they also spotted for naval guns. Following on from Taranto, perhaps the most famous action by the Swordfish was the sinking of the Bismarck in May 1941. They actually hit it twice. The first strike was by aircraft of 825 Squadron. Flying off HMS Victorious, they managed to achieve one torpedo strike which slowed the ship. Ark Royal got into range. 3 squadrons of Swordfish were launched from Ark Royal and achieved 3 hits, one of which damaged the Bismarck's rudder, stopped it manoeuvring and allowed the home fleet to get more easily into range and sink it with their guns. And the operation against the Bismarck was a good example of how the Swordfish also had certain advantages. It was able to fly so slowly that the Bismarck's flak guns found it difficult to track the biplanes, and those guns struggled with close-in targets, which was a bit of a surprising drawback, rectified later on the likes of the Tirpitz. Add to that the fact that the crews were so well trained in delivering torpedoes, how the Swordfish was stable and controllable in all weathers and at night, and as we're seeing, how it could turn very tightly, coupled with the aircraft's radar equipment that helped find the targets and guide the Swordfish back to the carrier. You can see why these sorts of successes were achieved. But then in February 1942, the Channel Dash, as it became known, illustrated its inadequacies. 6 Swordfish from 825 Squadron, with Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond in the lead, set out to stop the German battle cruisers Gneisenau and Scharnhorst and the heavy cruiser, the Prince Eugen, from going through the English Channel from Brest to their German home ports. All 6 Swordfish were shot down by their defenders, Esmond posthumously being awarded the Victoria Cross. As the war progressed, Swordfish had a major role protecting the vital supply convoys through the Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean, flying not just from carriers but also converted merchant ships. They were active on D-Day, hence the invasion stripes that have been painted on this one, laying smoke screens and conducting anti-E-boat patrols. The last one wasn't built until August 1944. The final operational squadron soldiered on until August of 45. It was testament to the Swordfish's versatility that it outlasted its successor, the Fairey Albacore, though that was really only in roles other than its main torpedo bombing purpose. But this was one of the great British aircraft of the war. And this one from the Navy Wing's Heritage Flight serves to represent all of the Fleet Air Arm's Swordfish and the heroism of the crews who flew them. Pretty long flight for the Swordfish today, operating from its base at Yeovilton in Somerset. And this, as we were saying, at such a slow cruise speed. They've actually got 3 on strength with Navy Wings. This is the only airworthy one at present. Hopefully their Mark II will fairly soon join it in airworthy condition. There's a third that's been used as a source of spares and so forth.
Oh, it's a Mustang. Have a look at that.
The 80th anniversaries this year of the end of World War II. It's worth reflecting, I think, on the fact that these biplanes sank no fewer than 21 German U-boats during wartime. An incredible record. Most of those while escorting the Arctic convoys to North Russia, a mission that's largely gone unsung. The aircraft now setting up for its final pass. This was one of the many Swordfish produced, not by Fairey itself, but by Blackburn at its plant at Sherburn in Elmet in Yorkshire. It saw service out in Gibraltar, with the Mediterranean fleet probably on patrols over the Straits of Gibraltar. It's now painted as an 820 squadron aircraft that flew on the operations that sank, or led to the sinking of the Bismarck. And with a final wing rock on the last pass, we say farewell to Glen Allison and the Navy Wings Heritage Flight Swordfish 1. They are now running in from directly in front of you. The latest generation of multi-role helicopters, specially procured to operate from the frigates and destroyers of the Royal Navy. These are MHA-2s, MHA standing for Maritime Helicopter Attack. I give you the Black Cats. From that opening first brake, the aircraft head out back onto the B-axis.
They came in formation, they now separate, but watch closely as they pull up again to cross each other. What they call the 180 cross. And again, as they run back towards Crown Centre, the camera's ready, you can see they're closing for the flat cross. Wildcat is crewed by a pilot and observer. It is also fitted with armoured crash-worthy seating for up to 6 additional troops. So the aircraft both need to reverse their direction. They do this by, well, it's called a wing over. I guess in helicopter terms it really should be a pedal turn. So again, it reverses the direction for both aircraft. And this time as they come to Crown Centre, they rapidly decelerate, performing a fast stop manoeuvre to finish nose to nose. These aircraft operate from very small helicopter landing pads situated on the back of destroyers and frigates. They have to operate in incredible weather conditions, both in terms of wind and sea state. So this kind of precision that you'll see demonstrated this afternoon is absolutely essential. This is the climbing carousel. The aircraft nose to nose at each other, climbing to around about 500 feet, while also revolving through 480 degrees. When they top out, they're both facing each other. Now they need to get out of that manoeuvre. They're going to do that by spot turn away from each other. Then watch for the steep nose down. This time both aircraft angle out onto the 45 left and the 45 right, just to give you another perspective. As they pull up into another wing over manoeuvre. There's a big handful of cycling, pulling the aircraft into a rapid but controlled climb, again up to 500 feet or so. You've seen a nose over in one direction, now in the other. The Wildcat can carry a variety of weapons, up to 20 martlet missiles for use against small surface vessels, and up to 4 larger sea venom missiles, armed with a 30-kilogram warhead, able to disable and destroy vessels up to 1,000 tons. Can also carry the Stingray torpedo, the Mark 11 depth charge. So a little greeting for you coming up here, aircraft transiting rearwards. And then dipping their nose in salute. And again, watch closely. This is another signature manoeuvre. axis. This is down away from you. This is the over-the-shoulder transition. Wildcat is fitted with a nose-mounted Westcam electro-optical device. A very impressive piece of kit, enables the pilot to detect targets in all weathers at long range. So for the last time this afternoon, running in for their final break, I give you from 825 Naval Air Squadron, the Wildcats. As this is what they do in the field. Wherever helicopters go, if they're away from base or away from their ship, they do need a source of fuel, and that is generally supplied by the tactical supply ring, who can operate out of just about any location. All it needs is a small helicopter landing zone. So Wildcats down, what a lovely joint display that was. It's always good to see dissimilar aircraft together. Biplane, two helicopters, past, present, everything in there. I've got a feeling the Wildcats will still catch up the Swordfish on the way home, even after refuelling. There were some lovely moments when the Swordfish pulls up on frequency. You can tell it's an open cockpit, just by the sound of the wind and the noise and the pilot stressing each syllable to make sure it gets through.
Now we're going to see the Chinook get airborne to position for its display. We're then going to Duxford, certainly the P47 going to Duxford. I think the Mustang might be heading to Sywell, I can't quite recall. But anyway, they will be airborne on their way, and then the Chinook is going to close the show. So the Chinook will be back shortly. So with a bit of a flourish, the Chinook repositions to enable the two American fighters to head on their way, and then it'll be time for that final item on our flying programme here at Cosford for 2025.
Yeah.
They are airborne again and about to depart back home to Yeovilton. And then the moment they're clear, we'll move on, which will, unfortunately, be the last display. But what a display it is.
Rise to the sky for the 2025 Chinook roll demonstration. There she goes. The Chinook is deployed operationally all over the world and is the go-to aircraft for the rapid insertion of and extraction of troops in dangerous locations. As the defence adage goes, the answer is two Chinooks. What is the question? That's applied ever since the Chinook joined the RAF in 1980 and is true today as it was then. To start the show, Cal's given us a wing over, rapidly turning back onto target, trading his speed for height and back again. The crew are now preparing in the cabin to drop off troops onto target. As the aircraft turns in for a downwind quick stop, they will simulate a late spot of a landing site to offload troops and vehicles, either on or off the battlefield. In the back, they're being efficient with their recce, making sure it's suitable to land on in the minimum possible time to avoid any threat exposure. Having found their site and making their approach, crewman Josh up front will be giving voice marshalling directions to Cal, talking him forward and down onto the landing site and monitoring behind the aircraft as she comes into land. On the ramp for you today is Flight Sergeant Dave Sims. Born and raised in Margate, Kent, he joined the RAF in September 2014 as a weapons systems operator and has been on the Chinook force since 2017. He's a qualified helicopter crewman instructor and has accumulated over 2,000 hours on rotary platforms. When Dave's not in work, and occasionally whilst he is in work, he can usually be found on the golf course. Those of you up close can see Dave clearing the troops and vehicles to exit the aircraft at the ramp. Riding into the roll demo with some style today, we have members of the Joint Helicopter Support Squadron. Keep one eye on that quad bike if you will, to see just how critical these enablers are at working fast. With the troops and quad bike gone, the aircraft departs with an over-the-shoulder transition, a defensive manoeuvre presenting the floor ballistic protection towards any probable threat. This gives the aircraft and any occupants the greatest possible chance of protection. With the aircraft turned away, Carl climbs the aircraft to return and provide some mutual support. Think of this profile as overhead protection for the troops now exposed on the ground, or alternatively, it allows a pair of Chinooks to land in sequence without any loss of airborne protection. We don't have any guns fitted for you today, but if we did, you'd see Dave and Josh ready to employ the crew-served weapon systems. The Chinook can be fitted with an M60 machine gun on the ramp and two M134 miniguns on the port and starboard sides, each of which is capable of firing 3,000 rounds a minute, or 50 rounds a second, and making one hell of a noise. The Chinook and its crew can protect itself and deter engagements anywhere in the world. As they dive away for another wing over, it's time to introduce our co-pilot for today's show. Joining Cal in the cockpit is Flight Lieutenant Jacob Cameron Johnson. CJ is originally from Cottingham, East Riding of Yorkshire, joined the RAF in 2016 and got his wings in December 2021. He spent his first 12 months showing them off to air cadets by flying them and other air experienced passengers in the Grob Tutor from RAF Wittering. CJ is the baby of the team, joining the front line in 2023. Feel free to call him a crow if you see him. He's an avid fan of Formula One, but when he realised he was too tall, he decided to become a Chinook pilot. Forget the revs of F1, CJ, the best noise in the world is that bit of blade slap. The crew are now positioning for a fast roping approach,
decelerating rapidly to accurately dispatch troops on a tight or otherwise unsuitable landing site. Think about rooftops or the deck of a ship, but today it's in front of you, lucky devils. In the starboard door you can see Josh kicking out the ropes, ready to supervise the dispatch of troops, while Dave does the same at the ramp. Unfortunately, due to operational commitments, we don't have any troops to demonstrate for you today, but you will still see the ropes go out. Up to 30 troops begin departing a hovering Chinook in less than 2 minutes without profile. Not just troops, stores of kit, and even some Fairey land sharks, more formally known as military working dogs, can go down these ropes, often giving the enemy pause for thought as they miss them by a whisker. Carl's departed with another over the shoulder. Dave has jettisoned his ropes at the ramp, but Josh is now working hard to pull his back into the cabin. So let's watch him getting a sweat on and introduce him at the same time. Sergeant Josh Lyons is a Staffordshire lad. He joined the RAF in 2014 as an aerospace systems operator and was posted to Scampton. In 2017 he made the right choice to retrade to aircrew and became a weapons systems operator. In his 5 years on the Chinook force, Josh has accumulated over 1,200 hours on Chinook, completed multiple operational deployments, been on the Queen Liz, and conducted overseas exercises in Sweden, Denmark, Poland, Cyprus, Jordan, and the US. Outside of work, he enjoys travelling, skiing, and for his sins as a season ticket holder of Wolverhampton Wanderers. This is the highlight of the Royal Demo season for Josh. Having grown up in nearby Penkridge, he attended Cosford Air Show yearly as a child with his dad, who sadly passed away in 2021. Josh is dedicating his performance today to his memory. Well, for those of you who are keeping an eye on that JHS team on the ground, the crew are now returning in to pick up that quad bike, which has been rapidly re-prepared by JHS as an underslung load. Underslung loads are the bread and butter of the Chinook force, with all crew members front and back working together to manoeuvre that 99-foot long aircraft into a finely tuned position. That's 99 feet and 8 inches if every inch is important to you. Cal's positioned in the overhead of the load under Josh's direction. Dave is looking through the centre hatch to safely direct the pickup of that quad bike, and all 4 crew are working in synchronisation with the team on the ground beneath the hovering aircraft. You may notice some of the hookers holding their arms up, and one is holding a static discharge probe or zapper snapper. They make sure to touch that hook first to dissipate any static electricity, which is critical in dusty environments like the desert, saving a nasty shock. As they transition away with that quad bike, they're watching the swing. Chinook is used in operations moving stores, freight and vehicles everywhere from Afghanistan to Whaley Bridge. The Chinook can carry 3 underslung loads simultaneously and carry up to 11.3 tons on its centre hook alone. This quad bike attached to the aft hook weighs just 350 kilos, but if it can be rigged, the Chinook and the hookers can take it. This capable aircraft is even able to pick up another Chinook, albeit with a few bits cut off to save some weight. With a maximum all-up mass of 24.5 tons, this workhorse can comfortably fit 30 troops inside, with seating on the floor up to 50. The raw power and versatility of the Chinook is all down to its iconic tandem rotor design, giving you that rocker. It provides a huge amount of lift, a large cabin, and is all achieved without any of that dangerous messing about with tail rotors.
It's the only alright display.
Leading JHS today on the ground, we have Corporal Jordan, who served 9 years with the British Army Air Corps. He served the majority of his time with 656 Squadron, working as ground crew on Apache. He's deployed to a variety of places, including Cyprus, Jordan, Norway, and some ship-based exercises. He's now a helicopter handling instructor based at RAF Benson, leading teams on extremely high readiness. If you're looking back at that unhappy quad bike, the crew are monitoring the load during all stages of flight, but particularly during deceleration as swing can develop. These road vehicles are not big fans of heights. crew are moving the aircraft to counteract that swing as the load reduces in the airflow. They're now returning to drop off the underslung load with an operational drop-off, which is the combined rapid drop of a load and the strops to egress away from a threat. Used in dusty or high-threat environments, it's vital to get supplies rapidly onto the battlefield. With that load gone, the crew will be setting off once more into a wingover, and they will now be positioning for a running landing. Running landings are used in situations where performance may be limited. This could be due to a hot and high environment like the deserts or high above sea level landing sites. However, it's also routinely practiced for emergency landing. It's our preferred landing style in the event of a single engine failure that may not give us sufficient performance for a hover. As Cal brings the aircraft back in, he'll be looking to set up at 80 knots and then fire a constant 3-degree approach to flare the aircraft's last bit of speed off at the bottom end. I can't even do a wheelie on a bike, so spare a thought now for the pilots attempting one while 30 feet in front of their wheels. Josh is monitoring the height beneath the front wheels while Dave monitors the aft disc. At 26 degrees nose up, those aft rotor blades would strike the ground, and nobody wants that to happen, let me tell you. The teamwork amongst the crew allows for effective information to be passed to Cal and CJ as they handle this long machine. As they approach zero speed, those of you on the right-hand side of the crowd will get to see a Chinook party piece, one of the only helicopters in the world that can reverse on 2 wheels. As the aircraft lifts once more, Dave the Wave Sims is going to have the best seat in the house, on the ramp looking out on all you lovely people here today. In case you can't spot him, he's the one waving with gigantic orange hands. Those are definitely his real hands, and he can be quite embarrassed about them, so make sure to give him a big wave as he goes past. As the team prepare their airborne audition for Strictly Come Dancing with a few pirouettes, let's do a final shout out to the people on the ground that make all of this happen. The Chinook is supported by a huge team that keep the airframes functional and airworthy 365 days a year, holding national standby and readiness commitments for worldwide operations. Flying for you today draws its crews exclusively from frontline units, with our roll demo activities conducted around normal operational commitments. It's thanks to the tireless work of our aircrew, engineers, ops, survival equipment specialists and all the other supporting functions that has enabled us to come and deliver the demo for you today. good things must come to an end, folks. So to end the show for you today, we'll see a final bow from the crew. Before we watch the incredible Gorny climb. Named after the base in Bosnia where the Chinook demonstrated its power, dominating other helicopter types during the Kosovo War. That completes the demos at an end. So one more time everyone, please put your hands together for the 2025 Chinook roll demonstration.